This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello. In this episode of the Food Programme, presented by me, Leyla Kazim, I'm looking at how having a neurodivergence like autism or ADHD can impact the way people eat and experience food.
A lot of the adaptations to neurodivergent people here are not just the food but the environment. We don't have like a commercial coffee machine, we just use domestic coffee machines and stuff because they're quieter, and for us that's the more important thing, is to keep things just quiet and calm.
And there's a sense of calm in this little cafe on the edge of Cardiff city centre. It's a small vegan place called Aubergine Café, connected to a community centre that's owned and run by autistic people. Anyone can come here, but it's all designed with neurodivergent people in mind. I've come because in this programme, we're going to be talking about how being neurodivergent can impact on how you eat.
Although I was extremely unhealthy, my brain liked it because it was actually self-medicating and seeking out stimulation from drinking caffeine.
I've seen me crying on the floor at 10 o'clock at night trying to get her to take a drink for the first time that day because she just won't drink.
I like how basically we make loads of dishes, but also I can zone out and just focus on making what I want. And it's like an hour and a half where I'm just in my own world, but doing something I enjoy and calming.
I think two of the very best things you can do with ADHD, one is sport, a racket sport. The other is being a chef.
Heston Blumenthal. We'll hear more from him later. First, I want to understand what makes Aubergine Café different from others and why it's needed.
My name is Alice Brown and I'm the co-director of Aubergine Café.
And so how do you tailor the menu to cater for the different tastes of neurodivergent people?
One thing we do is we'll let people just try a little bit of something just to see if it suits their palate, because some people can be really sensitive to certain tastes or textures, because it's a really big deal for a lot of us. We have in the autistic community, we have something called safe foods or same foods, where it's like your go-to whenever you're feeling kind of a little bit overwhelmed, or whenever it's like the one food that you can handle. We also offer things like sectional plates, because for some people they have a sensory issue with different food items touching each other, so they need to have things kind of separated.
So explain to me the challenges that someone who is neurodivergent would face eating out in a kind of regular place.
Sometimes having too many choices. The amount of times I've been in a coffee shop and just looking at the menu and feeling rushed to try and choose something and then just run out because I've gotten too stressed out. Not knowing what certain things are, what ingredients go into something. I know what that thing is called on the menu, I don't know what it is, what it tastes like, what it feels like to eat. Disordered eating in general is quite a big deal in the neurodivergent community, but one of the struggles that I've had is feeling like you're being watched or you're being scrutinised while you're in a cafe or a restaurant or something, and just not being able to eat because of that.
You mentioned already everybody who works here is autistic. Does the business have to be run any differently because of this?
We like to say we fill in each other's gaps. So we have a culture where everybody's neurodivergent. No one's having to explain why they need certain things or sort of advocate for themselves the way you would in most workplaces. Here everybody just gets it. If you're feeling overwhelmed one day, you can just step out and take a break. No one is going to yell at you for it. So yeah, we do things fairly differently.
Hi, I'm Esther, she, her, and I am the event coordinator at Aubergine Café.
So how do you make Aubergine Café accessible to neurodivergent people? What things do you have in place?
Now you get the spiel. This is going to be fun. Okay, so we'll start with the floor. I don't know what the technical term is, but I believe it's meant to be seizure safe, as in if you hit your head on it, it's not going to give you a concussion. We also have our noise cancellation station. Some people, they just want complete silence or as close as they can get. So for that we have Vanderfield ear defenders, which were originally made for construction, but I think they realised that so many people were using them as an accommodation to keep noise levels down that they started doing them in all sorts of fun colours. We also have an abundance of fidget toys right behind you. This is a customer favourite. This is the slug, the rainbow slug.
Oh, this is brilliant. Okay.
If we go over that way, we have the bracelets.
So on one side of the bracelet it says, please leave me alone, or you can turn it inside out and then it says, happy to talk. And so customers will put that on as they come in.
Staff will put those on sometimes as well. If they're having a day where they don't want to do chit-chat, they just want to come in and do the work that they need to do, especially if they're working in the kitchen, then they don't need to talk to anyone, and we will absolutely respect that.
By cultivating a comfortable and accessible environment, Aubergine Café creates an opportunity for neurodivergent individuals to fully enjoy their meal or drink, free from the usual distractions and discomforts. In the UK, it's been estimated that around 1 in 7 people are neurodivergent. That's the umbrella term that describes a variety of conditions that alter how people perceive and interpret the world. Some common ones are those we've mentioned: autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and dyspraxia. To get a better understanding of how neurodivergent people can be affected by issues with food, I contacted a professional who works specifically with children.
My name is David Rex, and I'm a paediatric dietitian in the Highlands of Scotland, and I work mostly with children with an autism diagnosis, looking at their difficulties with food. With lots of young children, from the age of about 18 months or 2 years of age, they'll go through a food neophobic phase where new foods are rejected on sight. There's a suspicion of them. For quite a significant number of children with autism, they don't grow out of it. The combination of psychological difficulty with change and preference for sameness and routine and fear of new things, combined with difficulties in sensory processing, taste and smell, but particularly texture, those things come together to act as kind of twin barriers.
And so what are the effects of, what does it actually look like?
There's probably about maybe a third of children locally with an autism diagnosis who never get referred to me because actually they have no issue with food whatsoever. Then there's probably about half of children with an autism diagnosis who are significantly more selective than average and have a narrower range, but it isn't a major concern and they do improve gradually over time. Then I would say there's probably about 1 in 4 children with autism where the eating habits are so entrenched that it really gets in the way of achieving adequate nutrition. The lack of fibre causing constipation and gut disturbance and affecting the microbiome, but additionally specific micronutrients that are going to affect the health of the blood, the brain, the immune system, etc.
So then how are you able to help children who are struggling at mealtimes? Because I can imagine it's particularly hard if the child also has difficulties communicating.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess working with the parents initially, and on the one hand, making parents understand that they haven't caused these difficulties, but equally recognizing that their attempt to address it may have made things worse. Many of those actions involve reducing that sense of pressure, giving the child the sense that the adult doesn't care if they eat or what they eat. Of course, the parent should care and does care. The safest thing is modelling. Simply being seen to be eating certain foods, making those foods feel safe over time, It's quite hard when parents see that modelling isn't having enough of an effect to avoid tipping over into coaxing, persuasion, active encouragement, bribery, blackmail, almost anything you can think of. All of these actions are often well-intentioned. They usually don't help a selective eater, and they're particularly unhelpful for a very selective eater.
Neurodivergent people often talk about safe foods. Could you explain that term?
Yeah, so with safe foods, it's foods that aren't going to surprise you. They might have the right sensory characteristics. They might have the salty or sweet taste you're looking for, but they might also have a very simple texture. They might be, for example, thick, smooth fluid like yogurt with no bits in or custard, or it might be crunchy and dissolve in the mouth foods like crisps. So there tend to be a preference for those sorts of sensory characteristics, but mostly it's that predictability. It needs to taste and feel the same in the mouth. And that's something that our food system is very good at doing.
Are they helpful for a child to have, or can they actually be quite limiting?
I suppose with safe foods, we need to view them both as part of the solution and part of the problem. Because children who are very fearful of new foods also can become obsessed with their safe foods. So then the safe foods are the things that are blocking progress to a new food. On the other hand, if you remove that safe food, it may be the child doesn't feel they have any other safe food to go to. So it's a bit of a judgment call between me and the parent, and sometimes directly with the child if they're older, to judge whether a safe food is part of the solution or part of the problem. The more extreme and entrenched the eating behaviours, the more we have to view the safe foods as part of the solution rather than part of the problem, which is difficult for a parent who knows the diet doesn't look right. It's difficult for me as a dietitian who knows that the diet is inadequate in all sorts of nutritional ways, but actually, ultimately, the child has to be eating something.
So a lot of these safe foods are often the beige foods, the salty, sweet, ultra-processed foods. Do you ever come across neurodivergent children who have a safe food that doesn't fall into that category? Like maybe their safe food is a carrot or a vegetable or something?
Absolutely. So it will often be the safer end of fruit and vegetables if there's a fruit and vegetable at all. So something like a raw carrot, which is crunchy. You might be able to move from a dry, crunchy food like crisps to a slightly wet, crunchy food like carrot if you're cutting it thin enough so the inside of the mouth isn't overwhelmed. Equally, some children who are stuck on a very narrow range of ultra-processed foods can surprise you. They could go for something completely unexpected, like sprouts or mackerel, something that seems very nutritious, but also from a sensory point of view, potentially quite challenging. So it's important that parents keep a very open mind and don't make too many assumptions about the type of food their child is likely to go for.
One of David's patients, 4-year-old Alaska, has been diagnosed with ARFID, or Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder. The condition is similar to anorexia, as it makes it difficult for individuals to eat, but those with ARFID don't restrict their eating because of a fear of gaining weight. I spoke to Alaska's parents on a video call.
Hello, my name is Marina and I am the mum to Alaska.
And my name is Ross. I live in Wick in Caithness.
So Alaska has only recently, within the last week, started communicating verbally. She uses a tablet to speak and an app called Cough Drop.
So this is how Alaska introduces herself.
Hello, my name is Alaska. This is how I talk.
She was only diagnosed with autism about December time. She's got quite clearly signs of autism, and also with her eating, she was very, very difficult to feed. She was almost impossible to wean. She went through a stage for a few months of she would just eat everything perfectly. And then, overnight, she just stopped. She's not eaten fruit or vegetables or meat for almost 2 years. Her specialist dietitian, Dave Rex, he diagnosed her with ARFID. And we didn't know anything about it until then. And we got a bit of a crash course in it. But yeah, she's a happy little girl.
She seems it when I saw her on the video just before we connected. When you emailed us, Marina, you described all of this, and it sounds like a lot, as challenging, stressful, and at times heartbreaking. I mean, what are meal times like for you guys in your household?
So she has a very strict routine. So she wakes up and has the same thing to drink. She has the same thing to eat. Then when she goes to school, she's got a packed lunch we send. And then when she comes home, she's got a set food of what she eats as well. So if we want to introduce new food to her, it's not, you know, by added they say, oh, it takes kids 20 times before they like something. Alaska's about 2,000. I tried everything. I tried to get her like playing with pasta with different colours. I've tried all that kind of stuff and it just massively failed. And I've seen me like crying on the floor at 10 o'clock at night trying to get her to take a drink for the first time that day because she just won't drink.
She has 6 safe foods and it's her circle of trust. So you can't infiltrate those safe foods.
As in, you can't try to trick her into eating something else. You can't hide a carrot under.
If we were to
something
trick
else.
her, she would lose her trust in that and she would drop that food and never pick it back up again.
She may be frightened to eat. We don't know. We have no idea why she doesn't want to eat.
So it's hard and you cannot help but blame yourself. Because, you know, my daughter has this, but no one else has. So maybe I've done something wrong, you know. And then after you kind of go blaming yourself and then you're like, maybe I could have done things differently. But it's not. It's something she's born with.
What are Alaska's safe foods?
So she'll only drink water out of this. Nothing else. Nothing else. She eats cereal, Rice Krispies sheep stuff. Plum bears she'll eat. She'll take yogurt. She'll take milk. She'll take Nutella. She'll take that wafers, things by Ella Kitchen things. And then she'll take like that Kinder chocolate, you know, the little kid chocolate. And that's it. That's all she'll take. But she loves to chew on metal. Car keys, coins. We think it's because her iron was so low. Like at one point when we got her iron tested, she was like the lowest kid they had tested.
Do you also then supplement what she does consume with nutrients that she's missing? And if so, how do you give them to her?
Yeah, so I put protein stuff into yogurt. I've tried sneaking veg in, I've tried doing all of this, and it just messes with it too much, and then I'm worried about her dropping it. So under the advice of her dietitian, we have given her more vitamins than she actually needs. It would be idealistic and a bit naive to think that the fact that she's had no meat or vegetables will not affect her development, because it will. But she's at the normal weight and she's slightly higher than the rest of her class and for her height. It's just very strange considering she basically lives on the air.
Marina and Ross, more is beginning to be understood about the connections between autism and eating disorders and how a different approach could be needed for treatment. Last week, Claudia Hammond spoke to Professor Kate Chancharia from King's College London for Radio 4's All in the Mind. She had found that around 30% of eating disorder inpatients are also autistic. She also met Fiona Hollings, who is autistic and is recovering from anorexia. She began explaining what life has been like for her.
I just felt this like pervasive feeling of being wrong and getting things wrong and being broken. And then this anorexia came in and it felt like a way of kind of coping with the world, I guess. It felt like it took me out of the world that I couldn't understand and was difficult and loud. And then I ended up in hospital. The hospital environment was incredibly overstimulating and loud and very regimented, and I felt even more out of control. And things certainly got worse before they started to get better.
And did you know at this time that you were autistic and that this might be affecting how you responded to treatment and what sort of treatments you needed individualised to you?
No, didn't. I knew what autism was in sort of the back of my mind, but I had a very narrow, stereotyped version of what it was.
So, Kate, do we know how common eating disorders are in people with autism?
We have estimation, Claudia, because what we found that almost a third of our inpatients were autistic or having high traits of autism. So that's when we started to look more closely. Then we saw that people with autism have longer stay in the hospitals and poorer eating disorders or functional outcomes.
Why is this? What could the link be between autism and then developing anorexia, say?
Well, exact mechanisms are not known, but people with autism have some peculiarities around eating. Some of them are sensitive to smells, problems with certain colours of food, temperature of the food.
Professor Chancharia has set up a project called the Peace Pathway to provide a tailored, structured treatment approach for women both on the autism spectrum and diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. It was something Fiona Hollings helped develop through her own experiences, and she explained to All in the Mind how the new approach helped.
I guess for me, noise is probably my biggest sensitivity. So almost just being able to sit there with my noise-cancelling headphones on and not feeling like I'm being rude or being judged. And actually for me, that is just a way of me regulating myself. And then communication. So I find writing things down and having visual things really, really beneficial. So I will write to my treatment team. They will write back to me, and that also really helps. And then just predictability and routine. So I see the same person at the same time each week in the same room. And knowing that that is routine and consistent takes so much excess anxiety away from the whole situation that it means I can really engage in those sessions.
Have you been able to measure what sort of difference it can make taking this approach?
After implementing Peace Pathway, a hospital stay for autistic patients decreased. And what was for me biggest surprise, neurotypical community is also very happy with reduction of noise, keeping environment more respectful.
That's interesting, isn't it? That it's something everyone likes, actually.
Absolutely. And communication passport is fantastic for every single patient.
You can hear more of that interview on BBC Sounds. Just search for All in the Mind. As scientists learn more about the brain-gut connection, I wondered if it could be particularly important for neurodivergent people. It's something nutritionist Lucinda Miller has been writing about. She is the clinical lead at a company called NatureDoc, which specialises in the nutrition of neurodivergent children.
Most of the time when parents come to see us, it's because their child has probably had a diagnosis of some sort of neurodivergence, but they're not coping with that very well. There's often poor sleep patterns, difficulty feeding them, mood swings, emotional dysregulation. So what we try and do is to work on the diet to see if we can stabilise their energy levels, so to get better brain energy, and that can also even out the mood.
So what are Lucinda's top food tips?
So my top 5 brain foods are as follows. The first one is blueberries, which I call brain berries. And this is because they're full of antioxidants and polyphenols, which help with brain flow. So that can help in the longer term. The next one is eggs. Eggs are full of protein, and protein are full of amino acids, and those amino acids are building blocks for your neurotransmitters, and your neurotransmitters are the things that help you learn and think clearly. Also, eggs contain something called choline, which helps with working memory and processing and executive function, so very, very key. The next one is oily fish, so things like sardines, salmon, mackerel, not kids' favourite foods, but these really help to mature the central nervous system and help with eye development and brain development. Green veggies, always really important for kids. I know some really don't like them, and so smushing them up into smoothies or grating them to muffins or waffles or something like that really can be a win. But the greens contain folate, and folate's a very important part of our brain nutrients that we need. And then the last thing is nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds contain lots of zinc. So things like pumpkin seeds contain really good levels of both iron, magnesium and zinc. And these are really important minerals for the brain. So eating lots of nuts and seeds is really important too.
But what can you do if your child simply won't eat these foods?
In our clinic, we work with a lot of children that probably only eat 2 to 4 foods. And that could be a yoghurt and a cracker. And that's it. And we're always looking to see what's going on. So sometimes we're looking at something called their oral tone, so the muscle tone of their mouth, to see are they physically able to chew and swallow efficiently. And sometimes we have to put in exercises to help build that strength. Another thing is that when you're low in certain nutrients, it can make you feel rather nauseous, have a very poor sense of smell and taste. And 2 of those nutrients are iron and zinc. Often these children are drawn towards crunchy beige food that doesn't need to have a particularly strong taste, but at least feels nice in the mouth. So when you build up the zinc and the iron, which normally means supplements to begin with, then the whole neurological system fires up again, and then they're able to tolerate more foods. And this is where you can start to introduce a different brand or a different coating on the nuggets, for instance, or a different flavour of yoghurt or whatever it might be, and slowly expand. And over time, you can get there.
Lucinda Miller. Her book, Brain Brilliance, which includes recipes and advice for parents and those looking after neurodivergent children, is out now. Speaking of brilliant brains, the food programme got to speak to Heston Blumenthal at the Abergavenny Food Festival a few weeks ago. Before going on stage, Heston sat down with Sheila Dillon to talk about how his ADHD diagnosis came about.
I see myself as a walking experiment. Because I've been working with the senses for years, I wanted to know in which order do the senses work? Sight, sound, touch, etc. So let me just set that to one side. A few years ago, I went out for dinner with my son, his best mate and his dad, who was a psychiatrist. And we're talking, and he said to me, I think you've got ADHD. First time I'd heard of it, and I said, how can I have ADHD when I've hyper-focused so much on my subject? He said, that's classic. Your attention can wander all over the place, but if you find something that you love, then you can hyper-focus on that subject. So I went and got myself tested. This is nearly 10 years ago.
Did it make you sort of fit what you thought of as you into a set of symptoms, or did it help?
I think the diagnosis was really precious because it gave a lot of reason to understand myself and that there will be other people like me. So now I've started cooking again. I made some gazpacho and I went to put it in the fridge to macerate, and I stuck it in the oven. So it might think, how the hell did you manage to achieve all the stuff you've achieved with the fat duck? How did it happen? Yeah, maybe everyone else has those stories, and maybe some people don't. But I think that's one area where the symptoms of ADHD are more generic, if you look them up, than the symptoms of bipolar.
Last year, Heston spent 2 months in hospital after a crisis with his mental health and was diagnosed with bipolar.
It was my wife that saved my life. I'd have these moments of wonderosity. Everything is wonderful. I want to save the world. I think I'm Jesus Christ, or whatever syndrome you want to call it. It was a massive high, I suppose, but it was very manic. So I was vomiting ideas. I'd be writing them down, I'd be scribbling away. And then someone would move the post-it note. I mean, it's a metaphor, but it can also be a reality. It's like a toddler that's running around laughing, screaming with laughter, and then something changes. Then they start screaming. And I started hallucinating. So I ended up being sectioned, and I was 20 days in a psychiatric hospital, which I would prefer not to go back there again. The psychiatrist said, you're bipolar.
There had been no signs of the bipolar when you were younger and when you were working in this frantic way.
I've thought about this, and I'm sure there were. When I look back, I think, I was going a bit like Queen, Don't Stop Me Now, juggernaut. But I didn't realise it. I thought that was normal. And it must have been difficult for people to live with me as well.
But it was allied in people's minds with your creativity. I mean, this extraordinary way of cooking. You became the most talked about chef in Britain. I mean, you were on the covers, you were on serious newspapers, you were absolutely everywhere. So if you had these symptoms as you're describing them now, when you understand yourself better, it was all hidden in this cloud of fame. And
exactly, cloud of fame, also the cloud of the kitchen. The doors open at midday, so you have to be ready. There is a discipline there.
I mean, the way you're describing, the intensity that you worked at the Fat Duck, do you think that ADHD is a good fit with being a chef?
I think two of the very best things you can do with ADHD, one is a racket sport, the other is being a chef, being in the kitchen, because it enables you to do multitasking. The benefit is having 4 things on the go at the same time. You're listening for the sizzling of the butter, because obviously when that sizzle stops, if you're making beurre noisette, it'll start to burn. You remember something that's in the oven, and then you're doing your prep. So if you enjoy cooking, I would say it is just about the best thing you can do.
Heston Blumenthal. As more people in the UK, like Heston, recognise traits of neurodivergence and get diagnosed, a growing support network is also emerging, with an increasing number of people and companies offering ADHD coaching. Leanne Maskell has ADHD and now supports others through her coaching company, ADHD Works. She explained how food impacts her and how coaching has helped.
I used to drink 10 coffees a day. I lived on chocolate, mainly chocolate and alcohol, and I was essentially living on this kind of roller coaster of highs of sugar. ADHD is linked with an interest-based nervous system, and also the fact that we are seeking dopamine because of the neurotransmitters in our brains means that people are far more likely to reach for easy, quick options, delivery. I coach many people that when we look at their financial aspects, they are ordering delivery 3 times a day, because this culture that we have now in our world where food can be delivered to you as soon as you think of it has created a culture, and it makes people with ADHD really vulnerable who are impulsive. For me, being diagnosed really helped, and especially finding an ADHD coach as well, because they helped me to develop routines that worked for my brain. For example, cooking food on the weekend in a slow cooker, like a lasagna, and then eating it all week, and just having something in the fridge, and creating routines as well, like having a food delivery each week that would arrive pre-ordered, so I didn't have to think about it.
Leanne Maskell, director of ADHD coaching company ADHD Works.
All right, off to aprons. Hello, how are you?
At a private school for neurodivergent children in North London, cooking classes are now being taught in a new kitchen.
Right, Aaron, go wash your hands and then come sit down. All right, guys, have a seat. Today we're going to be making paella, which is a national dish in Spain, Spanish. So what we're going to do before we start is we're just going to talk about some of the key ingredients we're going to be using. Tomatoes are a key element in this dish. And actually there are festivals in Spain where they celebrate the tomato. In fact, one of them where they all go out onto the streets and throw them at each other.
A food fight.
Like a food fight.
My name's Alex. I'm 13 years old and we're making paella. I like to learn how to make new dishes because I've eaten them before, but I don't know how to make them.
My name is Aaron. I am a 13-year-old boy. I feel like I'm very good at cooking, or I'm just lucky. I don't know. It's a rare sight to see me cut onions at home. And the craziest part is that my eyes don't get sweaty when I cut the onions, because guess what? I have glasses.
I'm Oscar, I'm 13, and my special interests are trains, planes, Formula 1, and space and travel. We're making paella, which my sister is very excited for because she's obsessed with Spain.
Have you tried paella as well before?
No, I got too scared. I was on a holiday. And when I'm on a holiday, I'm scared I'm going to get food poisoning, so I was more careful with what I ate.
Onion, excellent. So you're going to put a piece of onion into your oil.
As the children got on with the cooking, I sat down for a chat with head teacher Bridget Young.
Our young people have what we call subtle but significant needs. So
They're all following the national curriculum at a similar level as their mainstream peers, but they haven't been able to access mainstream education for different reasons.
And so they've ended up coming here?
Yeah.
Okay. When we're thinking about young people, it's quite common for them to have quite strong opinions about foods that they like and that they don't like, in general.
Yeah.
When a young person has a neurodivergence, does that get amplified in any way?
Yeah, sometimes it does, yeah. I think it's often a sensory issue. So it could be around the textures of certain foods, it could be around the smells of certain foods, or it could be the environment as well. So, for example, if you're in a very crowded dinner hall, that could cause a lot of anxiety for a young person. We do have a dinner hall, so a lot of the young people will choose to eat in there with their friends and enjoy talking and eating in a social way. But others will have a lot of concerns around that, so they'll have quiet eating spaces. So we've got two quiet eating rooms, for example, and then that's too much for some. So we might have individual spaces where they can just go and eat on their own. And I think sometimes it feels like they don't want anyone looking at them, they don't want to look at others. And so, yeah, we try and be as accommodating as possible.
Can you tell me a bit about because you've got a new kitchen, right?
We built it because food is very, very motivating for the young people. We've always had a program of OT where the occupational therapist will use food to motivate the young people to do the OT activities. So the OT activities are things like, sensory integration and like different motor skills. And so they've chosen to do it that way because food is really motivating. And then we thought we could make this bigger, make it a qualification so that young people can think about having a career in food. Or it's not just really about careers though, it's more about the fact that they really enjoy it. They feel very proud of their cooking. So there's something so rewarding about giving something that you've made to someone and then they like really enjoying it. And something interesting about autism, I think, is the need for authenticity. So I think if they made food and they gave it to you and you sort of went, in a fake way, they'd feel that. But when it's authentic and authentically enjoyed, then it's something that's really rewarding, I think.
Bridget Young. At the end of the 90-minute lesson, tidying up is almost done and the students are having a taste. You guys look like you are tucking in and you look like you're enjoying it. What's the verdict?
Quite nice.
Yeah? I mean, it looks good. Hi, Oscar. How is your paella?
It tastes good. I think I may have had it once on holiday, actually.
Oh, nice. So it reminds you of the holiday you were on?
Yeah, in Tenerife, my favourite place on earth.
That's so nice. So do you like cooking?
I didn't until I started at Holmewood, and then they've made me like cooking so much, I go out my way to cook at home. So I made cupcakes, but I put too much icing on, but it still tasted really good. So that inspired me. And also pumpkin soup I really enjoy making.
Oh, wow.
Because my sister loves Halloween, so we get pumpkins like the day we can. So we've been making them.
What do you like about these food tech classes?
I like how basically we make loads of dishes, but also I can zone out and just focus on making what I want. And it's like an hour and a half where I'm just in my own world, but doing something I enjoy and calming.
Wow, my God, this is such a great advert for everyone who should start cooking, because you know what, I actually experience a bit of the same when I cook. You're sort of in your own world and you're just able to just get on with what you're enjoying without sort of being distracted.
Yeah.
Do you have any favourite foods?
Yeah. It's my safe food is schnitzel and waffles. I've had it pretty much every night of my life. But until recently, I wouldn't try anything else. But thanks to school, I do try more now. So I had a risotto, I think, last night, although still with my schnitzel, but I had more of a risotto. So I was really proud of that.
Wow, that's brilliant.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Blumenfeld and I am the food technology teacher at the Holmewood School. So last week we were in France and we made mini quiche, working with short crust pastry and thinking about different filling combinations. And next week we are making pizzas from scratch. So we'll be making the dough, seasoning the pizza sauce and then considering preparation of toppings and baking.
And they love your lesson.
Oh,
yeah.
I love having them in here. Some of them are real foodies at heart, in spite of their sensory issues around food. They really throw themselves into this as a subject. It's not what I expected when I started teaching here, if I'm honest with you. Because they've had a hand in making the dish themselves, there's that pride. And they've seen exactly what's gone into it as well. So there's that knowledge Once those two things combined, they're much more happy to take risks. Again, there are some students, a couple in this class, they will touch most things, be in the room with most things, will not eat it. Won't push them. That's fine. They've actually had the benefit of the process and the learning.
So what do you think these food tech lessons in this beautiful kitchen has brought to this school and to the students and to the parents and families?
Just so much confidence. I think the pride that comes from preparing your own food from scratch is immense. Communication skills, these students often have to work together, navigate this space, be safe, be calm. So they're developing those interpersonal skills at the same time. And just a love of food, and that's so important.
Have you had any feedback from parents?
Lots of really positive feedback. I think the homeschool link is really important. So my focus for this year is to find more ways to bring those parents into school to see what we do and to find a way for them to engage with their children in this space would be really nice as well.
Charlotte Blumenfeld, the food tech teacher at the Holmewood School, a perfect example of how good food education can transform so many aspects of children's lives. Food can be complicated for many of us, but it can be especially challenging for neurodivergent people. But with more research, better education, and stronger community support, there is also much to be optimistic about, especially for the children we've heard from in this programme. Before we finish, I'd like to leave you with a message of hope from Esther at Aubergine Café in Cardiff.
Some of the most frequent messages that we get through our social media and our emails is that it gives people hope that something like this exists, and even if they're not here or even in the country, it still helps them to know that places like this exist and that places like this are spreading. We have a lot of people who love being here who, when they're overwhelmed, like we had the marathon recently and it was so hectic, and we had a couple of people who come in and said, look, I don't want to buy anything, but can I just sit in here? I'm so overwhelmed. Absolutely, yes, you can. And if you don't have the money to buy something, use our Pay It Forward scheme. That's what it's there for. We have people who donate money to make sure that everyone can have a coffee, not just people who are homeless, even just people who are struggling a little bit, or I don't know, if you've lost your wallet that day or left it at home, that can be so difficult. If you want to sit down with a cup of tea, sit down with a cup of tea. Someone else has already paid for you. You don't need to stress about it. We've got it.
Thanks for listening. Today's episode was presented by me, Leyla Kazim, and it was produced by Natalie Donovan for BBC Audio in Bristol. For details of organisations which offer advice and support for those with eating disorders, do go online to bbc.co.uk/actionline.
Hi everyone. Hey, that's Mariana Spring. I'm Sarah Smith, and we are a couple of the hosts of America. And right now, as you might imagine, it's not very quiet over in Podcast HQ. We've been keeping ourselves very busy. Yeah, because the two of us, along with Justin Webb and Anthony Zerker, are now getting together a few times a week as we chat through trying to untangle all the twists and turns and developments in the US presidential election. And it would be fair to say there have been quite a lot of twists and turns already. We've also been chatting a lot about what happens on social media. My favourite topic. If you're interested in US politics, you want to understand what is going on, then I think you might really like our podcast, which is simply called America. You can listen to it on BBC Sounds. Until then, we'll see you all later.